And good morning again. I lost the video from the Clyde this morning and I was talking about change and currently the difficulties that many of us are facing at the moment. So here we are, we're on the 23rd of December, we're 2 days off of Christmas and experiencing a Christmas that probably none of us have experienced before. You know, Christmas cheer could be perceived as being in short supply this year, as we're standing in the sidelines watching what can only be described in many ways as chaos. In some ways, we could argue what's happening is against our human rights. The news is full of a mutated version of the virus. Our borders are closed. There was images on the news this morning of what looked to me like thousands and thousands of lorries. Good morning, Vicky. So Brexit trade deals, is there going to be a deal, is there not going to be a deal? And authorities have put a ban now on festivities to limit the contagion. And I caught a glimpse, yesterday I think it was, I caught a glimpse of a newspaper headline. Morning, Nadia. When I was in the supermarket, there was this, they set all the newspapers at the side of the stands, and there was a headline that said the UK is the sick man of Europe. So what seems to be going on, what's going on right now, and maybe it's just me, I think a lot about the collective consciousness, and I think a lot about what am I experiencing? Has this got anything to do with me? Or is this maybe more about what's going on collectively? And, you would need to be blind to see that we are in the midst of what could only be described as a massive shift, a massive change. And, what was true more than 2,000 years ago is just as true today. Jesus, and he wasn't crucified for his religious beliefs. Jesus was crucified for his political beliefs, and he rejected the imperial authority so much, which was the Roman Empire. He completely rejected that. My post. No parcels, just post. He rejected that imperial authority, and Jesus stood for the poor. And he stood for those that were unable to speak. And here we are today in the midst of a massive shift in perception, a massive shift of unprecedented magnitude. Our streets are lined with people. I was on the phone this morning at 6 o'clock to a friend of mine, Anne Hughes, and we were talking, and she lives in Govan, and she drove past the school and teachers were giving out food parcels. Our streets are beginning to lined with good people that are queuing up for food parcels. Food banks are bursting. They're at bursting point. And Anne and I were talking about it this morning, and it's absolutely heartbreaking that good folk are having to use food banks, and that teachers are giving food parcels to parents, and kids are coming into our schools and they're hungry. And then they want to say that people need an education. Our society needs an education of people. Yet how are we supposed to educate people when they come to school when they're hungry? How are folks supposed to receive a good education when wains are coming into our school starving and parents are having to rely on food parcels? But I could say it's shocking and I could get angry at it, but that's not going to help. So what I've been questioning is, how bad does it need to get before we unite? And when I say that, unite, let's unite in power and all that, we have to unite in power. But it's not about uniting in anger. It's about, or indeed violence in any way. It's about how can we unite to start to maybe extend ourselves, what good's my wealth or your wealth or indeed my abilities or your abilities, if your fellow neighbours are struggling, right? I've just been thinking a lot about that this morning. And we stand by and do nothing. And, you know, I think I started doing these vlogs. Because I thought a lot of people would never reach out for therapy. A lot of people would never reach out to see a counsellor or a coach, and a lot of people can't afford it. So what would be a way of being able to get a message across to people? And Christmas is all about a message of hope. It's about giving a message of hope to people. Yet so many people are feeling hopeless right now. And I know it's really difficult because we've all been hurt in the past. We've all given help in the past, and that help has went unnoticed. It's went without thanks. So what we do is we recoil, and we develop this every man for themselves kind of attitude. We're in the midst of what I can only describe as one of the greatest change cycles that have ever been experienced in my lifetime, or indeed probably the lifetime of my remembered and loved ancestors. I doubt they probably experienced anything quite with this magnitude. Now, arguably, you could say, well, they lived through a world war, but at least when somebody was at war, they knew they were at war. Like at the beginning of the lockdown, we knew we were in lockdown, right? We absolutely knew that. You're in lockdown, these are the parameters that you're allowed to move within, and that's it. That's where you go, and that's where we're at. I wandered down the street yesterday, and I was speaking to some of the older generation of our church family, if you like, that I've not been able to go to. I've not been able to go to church since March. But we stood in the street and we had a wee blether, and it seems to be as if the feeling, if you like, that a lot of people are experiencing, they might be noticing it, you might not be noticing it, is they're just tired. There's a constant feeling of being tired. And when we sit down and we break that down, why is that? Why is it that people are feeling exhausted and tired? It's because we don't know what's going on, okay? And working as a counsellor and a therapist that I've been doing for a while, 15 years, one of the hardest things for the brain to do is to not know what's going on. We like things to be predictable. We like to have a kind of understanding of where things are going, right? But it's like 1 week we're doing this, 1 week we're in tier 3, then we're in tier 4, then, oh, you're back to tier 4 again. I know the restaurants can open, but no, they can't open. And I used the analogy before and I'll use it again. It's like when you go deep sea fishing. So anybody that's watching that's into the fishing, you don't haul a marlin into the boat straight away. You don't catch it and bring it in. You let it run, you bring it in. You let it run, you bring it in. You let it run, you bring it in. Because you tire it out. And it's almost as if that's what's happening to everybody that I meet now. My social circle's pretty small, but those people that I am talking to when I walk the dog, and what I've also noticed as well is people's tempers, people's irritations are really, really high, and they're really up the now. So if somebody is being a wee bit crabbit with you and a bit ratty with you, it's not to get engaged in that dialogue, because that's not going to be helpful. Two angry folk in the same room's only going to end bad. It's not going to end up good. So, change. So for me, it comes down to change. That was me having a wee rabble, a wee rant. But change. So a change model. The reason that we've survived and got to where we are right now as a species, which has been developing for thousands and thousands of years, millions of years probably, we've been developing and evolving, is because we've had to change, right? And it's not the strongest of our species that survive. A lot of folk, oh, it's only the strong that survive. It's not the strong that survive, and it's certainly not the most intelligent that survive. Those that survive are the people that is more apt to deal with change. So I've had this burning question for, oh goodness, nearly 30 years, right? Because when I went into recovery in 1993 from drugs and abuse and all the rest of it, my whole world changed dramatically. I had to learn how to be not just sober, but I had to learn how to live in a world with all these new emotions and all these new feelings, because I only knew one emotion out it. That was the only emotion I knew. And if I had an emotion that I didn't like, I just doubled my out-itness, right? Or if I didn't feel that I was humorous enough, I maybe changed my model of out-itness, right? But then when you take away all those substances and the alcohol and the act and the personality, right? The hardest thing for me was not giving up drugs and alcohol, but was actually changing and living in a world where I had to feel emotions and had to run around with people that also weren't using. I had to develop. I found it really, really hard to go to social events that I would have once enjoyed when I was out it, right? Because I couldn't do that. So why, when change is the most paramount thing that we have to do, and sorry, Anne, I couldn't say your second name. Yep. So why, when change is the most empowering thing that we need as a species to survive, has nobody actually taught us it? They taught us algebra, they taught us English, they taught us art, they taught us arithmetic, they taught us these things at school, but nobody ever taught us how to be with change, right? So if you can be okay with change and learn how to manage change, you're probably going to have a far better outcome with what's currently going on. And how change happens, you've got different models of change, right? But the change model that I particularly work with, and I've worked with it for a long time, there are a lot, and some I just prefer better than others, right? But it's the freeze, change, freeze, right? So you're in a state where you're frozen, right? That could be in a job where you feel paralysed. You find yourself moaning and complaining about the job, right? That's my lesson this year, change. Fantastic, Nadia, right? So, change. So, sorry, I'm nosing out my window. I see somebody park their car. None of my business. Somebody's parked their car and I'm just nosy. Change. So you're in a relationship, you're not happy, right? You're in a job, you're not happy, right? You're frozen, you feel paralysed in that situation. Now, in the reptilian and limbic parts of the brain, that's also tied up with survival, you've got fight, flight, or freeze, right? So when you feel threatened, you're either going to fight, you're either going to flight, or you're either going to freeze. And I don't know how long you've been watching, but I was speaking about you this morning, and I've just been speaking about the food banks, and I've just been speaking about how shocking that is, and how we're need to change, and why we are not extending, not if we have wealth, but if we have ability, and we have a compassion, and we have a care. What use is our abilities and wealth if folk down the street are struggling? So, I'm in a body I don't feel happy with, and I'm frozen at my own lack of motivation. So the model of change that I work with is simple. There's more complicated ones, which we would use in leadership, or if you were working with a business that was looking to develop. But it's like freeze. Accept that you're frozen, right? Accept that you're frozen, okay? And when you accept that you're frozen, what you're then able to do is develop an impetus, right, on I'm going to unfreeze. So you sit down with a pen and a bit of paper, and first things first, you notice that you're frozen, you notice that you're stuck, right? And what we've got to do is we've got to unfreeze. So how do you unfreeze? Well, you first and foremostly determine what needs to change, right? You look around about you and you start to get an understanding of the current state. So is it financial? Is it physical health? Is it emotional health? Is it spiritual health, right? And then what you've got to do is you've got to understand why change has to take place. So if it's physical health and you're noticing you're getting out of breath when you're going up the stairs, you notice that needs to change. So you've got to understand why that change needs to take place. Are we overeating? We need to change because diabetes, risk, health risk, heart risk, cardiovascular. So we've got to understand that, right? But what we've got to do that's paramount is we've got to understand and we've got to ensure that there's a strong support. So that might be when we're losing weight that we use and we rely on a model that might be whatever, Weight Watchers, or we get a mentor, or we get like I've got a mentor, right? So my mentor holds me accountable to my behaviour, right? constantly. He's constantly holding me accountable to my behaviour, right? Then what we've got to do is we've got to frame the issue, right? And put it in a frame, and then look at how we can create a need for change. We can create a compelling message that we can start to tell ourselves, right? And then we look at our vision and we create a strategy, right? And then we look at supporting evidence that we can see that if I go from here to here, I'm going to feel that. So if I'm an X and I move to Y, I'm going to feel Z, right? So it's like, until you can understand what benefit a slimmer body or more finances coming in, or feeling less angry, or feeling less grief-stricken, until you can understand what that's going to be like at the other side, you need that support and evidence to use as a fuel, as a driver to manage the change, right? Now, you've also, all of us, I believe, are in the same boat here, that we've always got doubts and we've always got concerns, right? And the reason that we've got doubts and we've got concerns is because at this moment in time, where we are in this paradigm, we've got no understanding of what a new paradigm or what a new way of being is going to look like. Right? So in a lot of ways, we've got a secondary gain around about being frozen and being stuck in that particular paradigm, right? So for what would life be like if I was thinner, right? So for a lot of people, if they've been overweight all their life, or they've been, but why are we speaking about overweight when this has clearly got something to do with the pandemic? Now, what's starting to happen is it's almost like we've lost sight of what normality looks like before this pandemic. We're all frozen, it would seem, or rather, in my social circle, which is very small, the people that I love and care for, you know, I met Maggie the other night there, who I've got a massive amount of respect for. I've knew her if I was a wee boy, and I'll tell you a funny story about how I met her one day, but aye, goodness, 35 years ago or something like that, but yeah, about 35 years ago I met Maggie. But I met her the other night there, and she's just completely done. She's absolutely exhausted with this current situation and what's happening currently. It's like, I just put out, for an example as well, I just put out a retreat that I'm going to be doing on the 19th to the 21st of March, right? Now, in order when you're starting anything, right, in my opinion, you've got to put energy behind it. You've got to put a pizzazz of energy. You know, I believe that you can make dead flowers come back with the right intention, right? Whatever you put your energy towards, you can create. It's the intention behind how you move towards something that's going to give it, it's going to make it grow. So I've been pouring my intention towards this retreat on the 19th to 21st of March. Am I 100% sure that it's going to go ahead? No, I'm not. But what I've noticed that I had been doing over the last 8 months was I've not started certain projects because I'm like, well, it'll not happen. But where did that mindset get developed from? That mindset got developed about things getting released in lockdown, me getting really excited, like a child, right? And then getting towards it and it getting cancelled. Now, that happened 2 or 3 times to me. And I just threw the towel in. I just went a big Wayne. Well, I'm throwing my toys out the pram. I'm not playing any longer. I'm not going to have any. I'm not doing this, right? And what I started to notice was I started stopping putting my energy towards certain things because it might not happen anyway. So what's the point, right? That I noticed was really unhealthy. Okay, so when you're in the midst of change, what I've just explained to you there around about the change model, freeze, change, refreeze. So it's unfreeze, change, refreeze. That's the model of change that I work with more in a corporate environment than I would personally, but it's the same thing. Now, we've spoke about unfreezing. It's identifying the need, identifying that I need to change, identifying that this isn't healthy, identifying that I am not healthy, identifying that my thinking is not healthy around about this pandemic, right? And then when we move into the paradigm of change, what we do is we communicate. So I've just communicated with you my fear around about moving forward with a particular project. So that's a particular fear. So we'll go back to weight because somebody mentioned that Anne had said that she was tired about her weight, etc. So communicate often around about Angus, where is the retreat? And it's on my page. It's going to be in the Big Shepherd, which is in Glencoe in Scotland, leaving Glasgow, stroke Edinburgh on the 19th, Friday the 19th. And I've developed a model where we're going to be utilising hiking and mountain climbing and personal development, and probably looking at behavioural change models, looking at systemic and intergenerational work, where we're working with family constellation and the great outdoors and climbing, right? So once you're in the middle of change, communicate often, communicate. Now, for a lot of us that have carried weight for a long period of time, the secondary gain that we get from that is we then start to not want to be seen by the outside world. We then don't feel attractive. We then have an excuse not to go to particular events or do particular things, or indeed it ties into an underlying self-sabotaging mindset that we might already have that may have little or anything at all to do with weight, right? So the inner critic and the voice that we have, right, needs to use whatever critical way of thinking that it can in order to keep us separate and keep us out of oneness or unity or togetherness. So if weight is something that we're struggling with, the reason that we might use the weight is because that ties into our inner critical voice that doesn't want us to step forward and move forward into a happier, healthier way of being. Now, for a lot of people, when they move into another way of being like that, okay, they really, really struggle with that. They really struggle with that new place because it's new, right? So again, the best way to deal with that change is to explain to yourself exactly what's happening as you're going through. You give up cigarettes. Tell yourself, this isn't going to be easy. I'm going to feel rough. I'm going to feel as if I've got the flu. I'm going to feel as if my lungs are being strangled. I'm going to feel as if I want to strangle somebody, right? I'd probably be as well disappearing and going off into the desert for 2 weeks, because see, the next 2 weeks, it's going to be hell. But see, after 2 weeks is by, it's going to start to get easier, right? Speak to other people that have given up smoking and you collaborate a similar kind of experience, right? That this is what it's going to be like. And then you're going to be really sensitive to certain things, and then you're going to maybe feel emotional, right? So that's the way that we work through change. So you've also got to explain and prepare to yourself what is going on, what's actually starting to happen. And then once, and we involve not just ourselves, but we involve other people in that process. So who might the other people be? So if we're stopping smoking, maybe a stop smoking sensation class. So with regards to this particular, I get sidetracked so easily, but in reference to this current pandemic, when I, Ross, met these older ladies down the street yesterday when I was ordering some Christmas gifts, and they'd said I was tired. They said they were tired, and I explained to them how I was feeling and why I was feeling tired. Now, these ladies were in their 80s. I hope they were in their 80s and they weren't younger and they're watching, because they'll whack me with their brolly the next time they see me. But they said, they looked at one another and went, that's exactly how I'm feeling. It's the inconsistency. It's the not knowing, right, what's going on. It's the constant change in the parameters and guidelines of how we manage this virus, this pandemic, right? So we have to communicate how we're feeling with ourselves. We need to know that, right? We need to know that straight away. So rewind back to when I planned something, and then rewind back to when I planned something and then it got cancelled, and I went, ugh. And then that happened again, and then it happened again. And then after the second or third time it happened, I just threw my toys out the pram. I just went, right, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting excited, so I'm not going to plan about anything. So here we are. We're in the midst of an unprecedented change. We're in the midst of an absolutely huge shift. We're in a huge change of the way that we think and the way that we behave and the way that we act. And keeping it really, really simple, we are social animals. We are social creatures that are born to touch, to connect, to communicate. I really wish I could share with you the benefits of connection at a brain-based level and be able to show you PowerPoints on these little lives of just how instrumental human touch and connection is for our mental health, our physical health, our well-being, okay? So we're learning how to manage being in a world where we're not allowed to touch, where we're not allowed to be together, where we're not allowed to work, where our rights are getting stripped away from us. And I was watching something last night, and it got me worried. But I noticed it got me worried, so I immediately reached out to somebody and told them that I was worried. It was around about, there's going to be a travel ban to England. You're not allowed to go there. And then the police had come on and said, well, we're not going to enforce that, so whatever. And then it was a kind of a few days to and fro in between, well, are you going to be able to travel to England? Are you not able to going to travel to England? And then the police, and then the government or the First Minister or the Prime Minister had come in and said, so what we're going to do is we're going to now start to look at putting that in law. So now then there's going to be a law created that because of this pandemic, it means you can't cross the border. But is that law just around about a certain strain of COVID that means we can't cross the border? Or does that law mean that we can't cross the border if and when at any time that anything happens in our near to distant future around about crossing the border? So I got a wee bit worried about that, and I thought, I don't know if I like that. So I asked my friend to reread over it. I said, could you look over that and see if I've interpreted that right? And they come back and said, no, you've interpreted that right. And they went, what's going on with you? And I went, well, I'm a bit worried about that. I said, I find that really strange and unsettling that whilst there's a pandemic going on, they're now writing things into law that may be able to be used in the near to distant future that might have little to do with a pandemic once we've all been vaccinated and we're all right and this all disappears. But the law was written on the back of a pandemic. And I thought, I just don't know if I like the feeling of that. Why don't you like the feeling of that? My pal said, I don't know, it just feels a wee bit kind of as if we're living in this sort of horrible world where all of a sudden everything that we've ever done is just going to be collapsed in the last year. So I communicated that. I was able to communicate that. I had a good conversation with my friend about it, and that alleviated the stress that I had around that. Now, first and foremostly, you've got to realise that you're stressed. You've got to realise what's going on, and it's okay to be stressed. What I personally do not think it's okay to be is angry. I do not feel that it's helpful to be angry. Now, I was angry for a massive period of my life, and I can still be angry. It's not helpful. It's not a helpful emotion, and no good executive decisions were ever based on anger. It can be a great motivator, but it can also be really, really disabling. And getting angry about the current situation is only going to weaken our immune system. It's not going to do us any favours. And if there is a pandemic and there is a virus that's mutating, that we're going to, it's 70 times. How do they know it's 70 times? But anyway, it's easier to contract and get this virus, right? You want to have your immune system as strong as it possibly can be. So I'm not perfect. I'm terrible. I've got a terrible diet. But I have religiously been taking the best quality because I'm self-absorbed and got narcissistic traits, that I would get the best quality probiotic possible, obviously. I've been taking probiotics daily. I've not now eaten sugar for about 7 weeks full blown. I'm going into the Clyde every day. I'm doing things and activities that strengthen my immune system. I'm very fortunate. I've got a dog. I've got a dog that I love. I spend lots of time with my dog. And when you clap a dog, it relieves stress. Why? Because it creates oxytocin. Oxytocin's the chemical that we need to bond. The chemical that we're not experiencing because we're being told not to stay, not to connect, not to be together, right? Oxytocin. Oxytocin, if you don't know about it, go and do your own research on oxytocin. Oxytocin is fantastic. I actually bought some a number of years ago online, and it came in a scoosh spray, and you put it up your nose, and I scooshed it, and it's just fantastic. It really is. Yeah, it's a really fantastic chemical. So oxytocin's the bonding chemical. It's the chemical that's released, and mothers and fathers get it as well when a child is born, and that chemical allows attunement and attachment and effective connection to happen with the baby and the child. And that if that connection is solid, that allows the development of the baby's brain to develop faster and stronger and make stronger and better neural connections in the brain. That's why it's very, very difficult when you're looking at child psychology, that when a child has been taken away and put in an incubator and it's lost that touch and connection and bonding and soothing and loving, and children there find it more harder to self-regulate, etc. But oxytocin's a fantastic chemical. It's a wonderful chemical. So I spend loads of time with Alf, and I give him loads of cuddles, and he's just such a lovely wee guy. And even if I'm just sitting when I'm watching the telly and he kind of curries into me like that, and I just have my hand on there and I can feel his heartbeat. I can feel his heartbeat next to me as I'm lying watching the TV. That is hugely powerful for connection. It's hugely powerful for mental health, and it's hugely powerful to keep us going and stay sane, right? So you've got to find what works for you. I could sit here and preach all day. I know it works for me, but if you're finding that you're starting to dip, your mental health is starting to dip, perhaps that is because you're stuck in the freeze state. Now, all change models, effective change models that we use in leadership and business and corporate world, it doesn't matter. It's all the same stuff. We can bring that down to grassroots. We can bring that down to this level, right? That if you're frozen, you're paralysed. You could be paralysed in fear. If you're paralysed in fear, you've got a massive amount of adrenaline and cortisol going through your system, and that's really, really dangerous. That's really negative. So unstuck or unfuck yourself, right? As I would say, just unfuck yourself, just unstuck. So recognise that you're stuck, recognise that you're frozen, and do something different. It may feel really, really hard. It may feel really difficult, because what then starts to happen is you start then like this ego battle inside your head where the part of you that's stuck wants to be stuck. There is a part of us that wants to be stuck. A lot of people say, no, I don't want to be stuck, or no, I don't want to be using these drugs, or I don't want to be using this alcohol, or I don't want to be in this destructive relationship, or I don't want to be in this terrible job. And I just go, yeah, you do. There's a part of you, oh, my wee screen went off and it gives me a wee bit of brightness in my face because I've not put any foundation on this morning. There's a part of us at some level wants it. You've got to be very, very careful about how you say that, because, you know, what that meant that the Jews wanted to get gassed, right? Which clearly, consciously, they didn't want to get gassed, right? I'm not saying that for a minute, but there's a part of us becomes associated to the affliction, the addiction, the pathology, the compulsion, whatever that might be, because we get something out of it. So if you're frozen, you don't need to socialise, you don't need to be nice to people, you don't need to connect to people. But I don't know if people that are going to watch this might identify with this. We've been in this for like 9 or 10 months, right? Sometimes I can be in the house for 2 and 3 days, and then I've got to go out to get something to eat, and I get a wee bit anxious, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go out, right? I could just phone Tesco's and get them to deliver my food, but I like getting in and looking at that kind of whoopsie, you know, the stuff where you get, I love that. I love getting in and making my dinner out of stuff that I get for like 30 and 60 pence. I think it's magic. That's part of my creativity, I guess. Going into Tesco's at 5 o'clock just as they're putting all the wee yellow stickers on everything, going, right, would that go with that and that go with that? And then I could have that. And do you think that would last to tomorrow? And I could have that with my breakfast. So you don't get that option if you're just getting deliveries all the time. You've got to pay full price for stuff, and that sucks. I hate paying full price for things. If I can get it cheaper, I will. Right, anyway, right. Are you stuck? Is your mental health suffering? Are you feeling frozen? And that could be love a whoopsie. Whoopsies Asda. Whoopsies are Asda, Stuart. Right? That's the whoopsie stickers in Asda. Tesco's don't do whoopsies. I don't know what theirs are, but you're going to make me think it, and I'll figure out what Morrison's is. We can have a wee debate about where's the best whoopsie and what time they come on and what aisle they're in, so we can just navigate all the traffic and go straight to it. See the simple things that bring me joy. It's not that difficult. So when we're looking at a model of change, it's going to be new because nobody ever taught us it. They taught us things that we're never ever going to use. What we really need, because our species, in order to survive, has to change. It's not the strong that has survived. It's not the most clever that's survived. It's not the most intellectual that's survived. Those that have survived are those that are more able and adapt to change, right? It's paradoxical because it's totally required for our development, yet it's totally terrifying at the same time, right? So let's look and nourish that part that's scared to change, that's scared to move on. And it's very, very easy right now to be angry at the system, and Boris Johnson's making a bad job, and Nicola Sturgeon's making a bad job, and everything's terrible, and we could all stay really, really angry, right? This is Christmas. The Christmas message was a message of hope, right? But nobody's going to come down out the sky and make it all right for you. I definitely believe that God, in my understanding, will move mountains for me. But I've got to walk towards them with a shovel, right? I've got to get out there and make the changes. It's like if you're sitting there asking for change and no doing anything about the change, nothing's going to happen. And then that just reinforces how you can be angry for that not happening. Okay? So, we're all in the same boat. But that's nonsense. We're not in the same boat. Because some folk are in more resilient boats. Some folk are in little tiny tubs. Some folk have got a hole in their boat, right? Some folk haven't got a sail in their boat. Some folk haven't even got an engine in their boat. Okay? So we're not in the same boat here. We're not in the same boat. We're in the same situation, but we're all in the situation with very different boats. But the similarity that seems to be running through this right now for our mental health is that we're starting to get tired and we're starting to get drained and we don't know what's round the corner, and we're starting to second guess, are we going into a national lockdown on Boxing Day? Is the whole country going to shut down again? That brings with it a lot of fear, okay? It brings with it a lot of uncertainty. It brings with it a lot of need to change. Change starts with a willingness to explore the fact of where we currently are. I love this wee quote, which I'll say before I go away. It took me years to understand it, but I love it now that I do. Always start a journey from where you are, not from where you think you are or where you would like to be. And what that means is, for me anyway, is if you're skint, we don't like people knowing we're skint. We don't like people knowing we're on the breadline. We don't like people knowing. We still walk about with an attitude and a personality that we've got it going on, right? We've got it happening. We'll never progress as long as that agonic part of us is filtering through to try and give us an illusionary felt sense of being better than we currently are. It starts with getting really into the motion of it. Step one of the 12-step process for me, I bang on about that all the time, but it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal method, is acceptance. Accept where you're at. Because when you can accept where you're at, even in a business model, we can start to change it, right? So, accept that you're frozen, accept that you're stressed, accept that you're angry, accept that these feelings that you're feeling are detrimental to your health, because happiness and connection is a far stronger ally than fear and anger. Now, it's very difficult not to get pulled into those emotions right now, but I'm encouraging you to at least start to think, where am I going to start my model of change from? Am I frozen? How do I unfreeze? What change needs to take place? And then moving into refreezing again once the change has been made. Because unfortunately, none of us can slide down a hill consistently working and managing change. It doesn't work like that in my understanding. It works as frozen, unfreeze, change, refreeze, right? That's the way I see it. That's the way I see it happening. So then once you're in that new model, that'll work for a while and it'll give you a bit of mileage and it might be a semi-successful way that you're moving into it. Don't get stuck in that. We need to then be transient, right? Then what needs to develop, what needs to grow, what needs to change, how pliable can this model that I'm now working be? Okay? So that was my message for the Clyde this morning. And I deleted it instead of putting it up. And the change curve that we're all going on right now can go one of two ways. It can either be really joyful and really exciting, or it can be very paralysing and very fearful. And you could come in here and go, but money, and X, Y, and Z. And there's a massive amount of stuff that we could talk about. Why? Which I'm desperate to speak about. I'm desperate to talk to somebody about, and anybody that's listening or watches this that's willing to come on and talk about it. Why in central Scotland have we got children going to school hungry? Why have we got families that are working, that are relying on food banks to put food on their kids' tables and on their tables? Why are we allowing that to happen in 2020? Why are we standing back on the sidelines watching families queuing up to use food banks? Now, we don't have to rush to their aid and give them food. We don't have to go into our pockets and give them our last farthing, our last tenner, our last pound. What we do need to do is, if we've got an ability, share what we can with people. And that might only be this. I don't have a client today. I don't have any clients today. And I actually I spoke with a friend, if we go into a second lockdown, like national lockdown, on the 26th of December, and things get difficult, I've already spoke to a friend of mine that what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer one session a day to somebody that would be unable otherwise to pay for counselling. And it'll be exactly the same ethics. It'll not be like a kind of throwaway gesture. There will be confidentiality in terms and agreements and that you have to adhere to on your side. And I'm going to offer an hour session through January, free every day, 7 days a week, for anybody that's struggling personally. To phone me up, we'll go on FaceTime, we'll do what we can, we'll walk, we'll meet, we'll go for a walk around the loch, whatever it takes, that's what I'm willing to share. And, you know, I don't particularly feel called to go and run out and open a food kitchen. I don't feel particularly called to do that. But if you're able to do that, if you're able to perhaps get a deal with Tesco's with those whoopsie food that's going out, and maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking entrepreneurial here, you go into Tesco's and you say, look, what do you do with all this food? Is there any way that we can get it and I can hand it out to people that are struggling? I don't know, but each of us have a unique gift. I believe that fully. And whatever that might be, other people, when you can share an act of kindness, you might just inspire them to get out of a frozen state, get out of the fear state. Look at that model of change. The model of change that we use in business it's just as applicable to us each individually. Recognise that we're frozen, we're stuck, we're needing to move forward, get the blowtorch out, unfreeze ourselves, do the change, and then we will refreeze. Then we'll unfreeze, then we'll change, then we'll refreeze. That's the cycle that we do. It's like we go a foot in, we step back, foot in, step back. That's the way it's going to be. It's going to be like that for the rest of your time on this planet. You might as well get used to it and learn how to adapt to change and adapt to the current situation that we're in. And I'm repeating myself and I'm going over and over again. Being angry at the authorities, being angry at where we're at, is only going to weaken our strength, our immunity, our physicality. And in order to get through the coming months, it's my opinion that we work together and we help each other out and we extend a friendly hand. So thank you very much for listening. For those of you that have took the time to watch this, I really hope it's been helpful, and I hope that there has been at least one wee nugget of information that you can take away with you and be the best you can. So all the best. Have a Merry Christmas. If anybody's in Lanark tonight, we do a 7 o'clock walk from Castlebank Park round the loop, and it's became quite a competitive and a lot of laughs. And if you're in Lanark or locally and you want to pop up to Lanark and you want to walk up to Lanark and go for a walk and have a talk, we all have a bit of banter, but it's all about winning for 2 or 3 years, so it gets a wee bit competitive. We've got that on tonight, and of course we're in the Clyde every morning, 7:45 weekdays, 8 o'clock in the morning. We will be at the Clyde on Christmas morning, our usual wee spot. Some of us are meeting up, and we're going to have a little fire, and we're just going to bring in Christmas morning from the River Clyde and be together. There's no hierarchy in there. There's nobody better than anybody else in that domain. We're all there together. We're all there to help one another and just spread a wee message of hope. And I hope that Christmas message has been helpful to those that have listened. Have a fantastic day and have a joyful Christmas Eve tomorrow and a wonderful Christmas when it comes. All the best.